Hey, this is Madalyn Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. We're going to start a little bit talking about X, I think, Madalyn. There were some tweets that came out earlier from Imran Khan around the conference where he's had Linda X. She was one of the guests there. They were talking about X. They were talking about the kind of new direction and her role at the company and how things were going. And while it's not directly anything relating to spaces, they did pick up on something that we've been discussing quite a lot here, which is around the demographic of the app and who might be using things like Spaces and all the video live stream stuff that Elon's shoving into the app at the moment, and the gaming streaming and all of that. And some of what they said really kind of resonated with what we've been saying about there being a younger audience, Madalyn. Did you see this earlier?
I did. It's an interesting thread and quite interesting how we just keep hearing a lot about Gen Z, like as if that's become a big target on the platform. So do you think we're just going to see this big influx of them using, because all we're hearing about right now is live stream video, like they're really making that a big thing over here on the X platform. A lot of us are all in on audio, so we're using Spaces. Do you feel like that's going to attract them over here for audio and video?
Well, it seems like it is. I mean, in this kind of thread that comes through from Imran Khan, he says, Gen Z is the largest, fastest growing segment, almost 200 million active users, I'm imagining that is every month. So that's quite a hefty chunk. It's obviously enough for them to be talking about it at this event. And I guess what we've said before here is that social audio, it's not only that kind of live stream content, it's this sort of more dip in and out type content. Also with the replays on here, it's that on demand sort of content, all stuff which we've heard, Gen Z are really interested in podcasts for exactly the same reason. They can pick what they want to listen to when they want to listen to it. And I guess the social audio side of that plugs into it, and certainly the live stream side of it, we expect that does as well. I don't know that I'm hearing many kind of younger voices maybe on Spaces at the moment. Have you dipped into anything that's kind of been more removed from what we've seen and known of this feature previously, Madalyn?
I haven't. I think they're over on TikTok. So it'll be interesting to see if that demographic starts coming and spending more time over here. But, Elon's turning this into the everything app. It is quite impressive that everything these other tools, other social media platforms do, X is now able to do or in the process of doing. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. We're still not used to using this platform to watch long form video, but you can upload long-form video if you have the blue check and you are a verified user. You're able to upload up to 3 hours of video now. And we all know about Spaces, and that's long-form. Is that going to drive Gen Z over here? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and interesting because you mentioned TikTok there, and it is all of this short form stuff that we're hearing that they're loving too. So potentially the longer form stuff isn't the right kind of content. It's just mind-blowing to try and figure out week by week exactly what direction they're trying to take this on. I still kind of get the idea that they're just throwing all the ideas out there and seeing which ones stick. And yeah, it's certainly for Spaces, I feel like we're almost on a little rocky boat in the sea. Like we're still here and we're clinging on, but we're not quite sure where it's heading or how it's going to be incorporated into things. Even the space bar, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, now the prominence is given to the video and the live streams. They appear in bright pink, right before they're given more prominence than Spaces up there. So it's no longer the space bar, it is the media bar, I guess. And, that's an interesting move as well. That impacts and affects. If someone's looking for something to engage with, they're going to see that video first. And that visual connection is that going to draw people to, tap on that more immediately than they would do on Spaces? And also on the feed, when you're scrolling through the feed and you see that someone's live, are you more likely then to tap into that and to spend some time there, right? Whereas for Spaces, we don't really have that. We've got the really boring card, which we've complained about ever since the day dot, right? Like, it doesn't really tell you very much. And yeah, we can set a reminder from it and we can start our space from it. But in terms of us being live right here now, when someone's scrolling, and unless they're kind of really looking at my profile directly, they're not necessarily seeing much. I mean, even that purple halo, which we discussed right at the top of this space, if that's not showing up as consistently and regularly as soon as we start a space, then that's us missing our chance, right, to show people that something's going on and grab attention. So all of these other things that they're lining up are sort of in competition, I guess, from our point of view, to the content that we're producing here for social audio on Spaces, right?
Exactly. And all of a sudden, the purple halo is showing up on desktop. It is there for both of us now. So a little bit of a delay. Glad to see it because, yeah, it's part of discovery. And people are missing out with these live spaces if they don't know about it. So having that purple halo going live is great. But then again, it's always a reminder. We always do a shout out to Andrew at Spaces Dashboard. I see he's here in the space. Hello, Andrew. Great free website where you can go and discover spaces that are live, scheduled, already recorded and available for replay. It's my favorite place to go when I want to stay on top of who's speaking in spaces, what's going on, and really have a pulse on the conversations.
Now, our next bit of news that we've found this week is about Spotify. So I found this online during the week. So Spotify is adding auto-generated transcripts to millions of podcasts. What do you think about this one, Madalyn?
So Spotify is making it so that you can automatically get these generated transcripts. Like while you're, am I understanding this right? While you're listening, is producing a transcript right in front of you? Because that's what this article sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it's once again, they've rolled something out. They're not going to explain it all end to end. But from what I can see from the images that they're showing in this article on The Verge, they're showing up a little bit like the lyrics do. So if you, I don't know, we have one of the Amazon Echo shows with the screen, right? And if we're listening to something on Spotify, every so often some of the songs have got lyrics attached to them and you can have them come up. It comes up a bit like karaoke and you can, sing along if you want to. Now, I guess this is probably very similar to that. And basically the transcript of the podcast will come up as you're listening. So they're calling it read along, which kind of reminds me of those old school, we used to have like cassette tapes and books and you used to read along to in the book and listen to the cassette tape. And when it pinged, you had to turn the page over, but that's probably showing my age, but it's that kind of idea. So, yeah, you're basically going to be able to tap into the read along feature, which is going to be below the podcast player. It says it's going to be time synced as well. So you are literally reading in real time. Whether or not it's producing it in real time, I'm guessing maybe it will be. I mean, it says it's going to be added to millions of podcasts. I'm not sure this is anything that necessarily hosts are able to kind of put their hand up and say, yes, I want you to transcribe mine. I don't think there's anything like that about it. I think they're literally using AI in the background to generate these and adding them to all the different shows they can think of that are over there. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, definitely good for accessibility. I'm a real champion believer for adding, the text version of something that's contained in an audio file because it is just so inaccessible to anyone that's not able to listen to it for any reason, whether that's through deafness or just because you're not in the right environment to listen to something in that moment. The transcript can be really, really useful. And Spotify are kind of saying, well, this allows people to sort of jump to a point that they might be more interested in the podcast. It's also going to be tied in with chapter headings and things like that. So it does add a few more features over on Spotify to the podcasts over there. But yeah, it does concern me a little bit as to how much, having said that potentially hosts aren't going to really have much control over this, how much access might we have if we wanted to edit something in that text content. Like, I mean, I did a transcript for an hour-long podcast today, and every time the guest's name is mentioned, it is misspelt. Now, as a host, you don't want that to reflect on you, that you couldn't be bothered or you didn't care. You know, someone's giving you their time to be a guest on your show. You want to make sure that when their name appears, it is spelt correctly. And if you're not able to do that because this is all kind of back end and locked down low and you can't get to it as the host, then that kind of ends up reflecting kind of badly on you in a kind of roundabout way, right? So lots of good points to it, but I do feel like there's sort of this influx, certainly with Spotify at the moment, you know, around using AI for transcription and, you know, really kind of pushing that out there for their audio content. Lots of good points about it, though, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, definitely good points about it, because I think accessibility is incredibly important, like you mentioned. Auto-generated, it's like, well, it's good because, yes, you can get out there immediately. It's great for accessibility, but I'm with you. Like, I'm a stickler for the misspellings, probably because I have such an unusual name. My name always comes out wrong in anything that's auto-generated, and I always want to immediately fix it. So I hope they do give the podcaster the ability to edit. I'm sure they will, but I just am intrigued by the part where it, you know, is talking about the whole time sync as well. So it sounds like a two-parter, like it's going to be auto-generated podcast transcripts, but then it says it's also going to be time synced so that as you're listening, you can read along. And I like that. I think that's an excellent idea. So it'll be interesting to see this roll out because, yeah, they're saying millions of podcast episodes are going to get this. So we don't know exactly when, but we'll definitely keep a watchful eye and see how that unfolds.
Our next story kind of follows up a little bit from this. It is Spotify again, and it is one that we spoke about quite a lot last week. I posted out the Verge article about OpenAI working with Spotify to clone podcasters' voices and translate episodes into languages that those hosts don't necessarily speak. And Danielle came along and had a really good point, a really good comment that I just wanted to throw into the mix, and is kind of relevant to what we were talking about just then as well. And she said that one thing that worries her about any kind of AI translation is that if you don't speak the language, how can you be sure the translation is accurate? And she says, considering transcription is not 100% accurate, how accurate is this translation? And I think that's such a good point to think about. Now, I would expect at the moment, right, they're doing this beta, they've got the trial, they're using quite high profile shows to push out these different episodes in Spanish, French, etc. And someone is listening to those end to end and just making sure that there's nothing that's not sounding right, I'm guessing. But you know, there's a lot there. There's a lot there in the nuance, in the accent, the way someone says something, that it's all very well to kind of think, oh, this would be great, my podcast could go out in French or whatever. But if you don't actually speak that language yourself and you're not able to screen that in some way, she's totally right. Like those kind of mistakes that we've been talking about in text, like where your name gets misspelt and all of that, when that suddenly becomes something audible in a language that you don't even speak, what kind of problems might that provide us with?
And can you turn it off so that, you know, you go and take a look and somebody says, by the way, it didn't translate properly. I know this language. And you're like, oh, well, let me turn that off, or have a way to edit it. So, she did bring up a really good point. I really enjoyed reading the thread y'all did back and forth. And I got all of that in the nest. It'll be available in the show notes for the podcast version. Love seeing these kinds of conversations because it gets you looking from all points of view.
YouTube Music. We're going to dive into YouTube Music now. There's a story here that came out the end of last week. YouTube Music rolling out auto downloads for podcasts. Did you see this one, Madalyn? Yeah,
and I still, when it comes to YouTube, I just don't think of it for podcasts. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around that. I don't even use it for music. I am a YouTube premium subscriber. I have been for years. I do it simply because I like watching videos on YouTube and I do not want to watch the commercials. I cannot stand those commercials that you're forced to watch, however, I mean, even though it's like seconds, and having to wait before you can hit skip ad. No, I pay the monthly fee gladly. It's pretty inexpensive. But I just don't use it for anything else. And I just don't think of it for podcasts. But I love that they've got the YouTube music now and they're venturing into having our podcasts over there. We're fans of podcasting, and hey, the more places we can be, the better, because I guarantee you there's somebody who enjoys the content we're putting out here for this podcast version that is probably listening over there. That's not going to listen elsewhere. So because we could have it available on YouTube, that's great. So I'm all for that. But learning that they're going to have this ability to auto-download podcasts, that's excellent. I mean, that's always a good thing, right? Because then it's like the next time you open it up, there's the podcast waiting for you.
Yeah. And this is a feature that most podcast players, we don't even think about. Like, it's just expected that your podcast player is going to do that if you follow or subscribe to a podcast. But, YouTube Music are having to add these things and tell people that they're adding these things because, as you've just suggested there, YouTube Music isn't necessarily a podcast app. However, with Google Podcasts going to close, which is what we reported on last week, that is going to be shelved November 2024 and be added to the pile of Google things that are going no further. I guess they need to start really pushing YouTube Music if that's where they are going to be putting their future of podcasting, and they need to make sure that it's working. Now, they seem to be enhancing the listener experience before they're enhancing the host experience, because most certainly the one key main feature that they could add to this to make this 100% better in a heartbeat would be allowing hosts to upload their RSS feed, which, is, again, just such a straightforward and obvious thing to anyone that's in podcasting. Like, that is the way that you distribute your podcast. So for an app that is supposedly now ingesting podcasts to not have the ability to do that does seem slightly crackers. But they're doing something, right? So they're adding these auto downloads.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah, you do have to go and turn it on though. So you have to go to your settings. You have to head over to Save to Library. That will switch on these auto downloads, and it means that the most recent episode of the podcast will then be downloaded to the device so that you can use it for offline listening. But you're totally right, Madalyn. Like, I have actually seen a couple of threads off the back of this, one on Reddit that I was looking at during the week, where there's actually some general discontent over having podcasts in a music app, right? And Spotify is a music app. YouTube Music by title is a music app. And we listen differently to things, don't we? I mean, do you listen differently to music than you do to podcasts?
Absolutely. And I know back in the day, a lot of people became very anti-Pandora and are all about Spotify. Pandora has been around forever. I remember back when it was web-based, it was free, it was called something else. It was probably 20 years ago. And I have always been a fan of Pandora, and that is how I listen to music day in and day out, is going to be through Pandora, whether, it's the app on my phone or on desktop. I've never liked Spotify, but I still can't wrap my head around the fact that people can listen to podcasts on Pandora, just like I can't wrap my head around people can listen to it on Spotify. For me, music and podcasts feel so disconnected from each other, but that's just me. I'm an old school podcast listener as well as you are. I mean, we've been around podcasts a long time, both as podcasters and as listeners of consuming them. And back in the day, podcasting listening was very limited, and it had nothing to do with music or music apps. And I guess so many of us became conditioned to have a podcast player that we consume this and that we still use today. I'm not a huge fan of Apple Podcasts. I think I was just talking about that here recently. I go back and forth. Whenever they put out a terrible updated version of Apple Podcasts, which they've done multiple times over the years, I switched to Overcast. And I have stayed with Overcast this time around probably for 3 or 4 years. I have not gone back to Apple Podcasts. I really like Overcast a lot. And that's where I prefer to do it. Now, would it be easier if I just listen to podcasts on YouTube, since I use YouTube to watch videos? Maybe, or Pandora, because that's where I listen to music. Maybe, but I'm already so conditioned to use the apps I want to use for very specific things. But for those who are latecomers to consuming podcasts, I could see where it's great that they have it on Pandora, Spotify, and this YouTube Music. And I guess, Suze, that this is going to attract a whole new crowd of listeners that never did venture into podcast apps, even though there's so many different ones. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's their main goal with it, isn't it? Is to pick up listeners who are listening to music, who then see a podcast they think they might be interested in, and then hit the button, press play, and become avid podcast listeners, right? But I still do understand that idea that, you know, your behavior is different, and why do you want podcasts in a music app? Like, I kind of understand that as well. You know, I guess I was brought around with Spotify when they did their daily drive playlists. I do actually quite like that. Spotify has got so much data on what I like and what I listen to, right? That it was just gold fire hit every time, whether it was a podcast they were serving me or music. I just would sit and listen to it for the whole of my commute, which is exactly what they're after. But when it comes to YouTube Music, I just everything about this so far with YouTube has been so clunky and so awkward, and this doesn't feel any different. This isn't like paving the way any smoother, I don't think. And yeah, there's certainly some unrest around, well, my behaviour when I'm in a music app is to listen to my music. It's very much, you know, a passive listen. I can do lots of things with it. And I think more and more people are actually leaning more into podcasts than they used to. Hence why subscriptions work so well. Like, I'm almost on the verge of saying you can't really call podcasts that sort of lean back type content anymore, because people are paying for it. People are paying and engaging and leaning into what they're listening to in a way that perhaps not so much with music. You'll still have that on in the background. I mean, that's probably a whole nother All Things Audio show altogether of its own. But yeah, just super interesting that, you know, man on the street is even saying, look, music, podcasts, they're two different things. I listen in two different ways and I want them in two different places. So yeah, a very interesting conversation that I'm sure we could continue for a while. And I definitely want to hear from people in the space when we open up the mics in a moment. A big thank you to our sponsors, Zealous.
Yes, we love Zealous. You've heard us talk about them multiple times here on the podcast, in the space, because Suze and I use it. We actually use this tool all the time. Suze, you're always creating these great audiograms after our space. They come out so good. I love playing with this tool, and they're always adding new features. So we're really excited to welcome them on board as a sponsor. We definitely urge you all to check it out and give it a spin yourself and see what you think. There is a free trial. Just go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com/zealous.
Madalyn, while we've been talking, our community, the amazing All Things Audio community that they are, have discovered a piece of breaking news, which we do love here at All Things Audio, don't we? Have you spotted what's just popped up in the Spaces chat from Morgan about Threads?
I did. It's a very interesting breaking news, and I'm hoping Morgan can come up to discuss that with us, among other things, because we have, you know, such interesting news today that he's always great at reporting on. I will admit I have not been in Threads much. I did like what most people did for about a week or two when it was the shiny new object. I was playing around in there, but I have not really been back. Have you, Suze? Have you been in there much?
No, not so much on Threads. No, I really haven't been back over there. And I don't really know that voice would take me back over there even. The tweet that has come from Chris that we found about Threads, it's actually really visual with not a lot of words and just shows us that there is a microphone icon right where you would create a new thread, which I think is what is obviously spinning everybody's thoughts about whether or not they might be adding some voice notes to the app. But as I say, I'm not sure it'd be enough to draw me over there.
Yeah, I mean, it might for me. I like, you know, any opportunity to do audio, but, you know, I'm very content here on the X platform using audio here in Spaces and the voice DMs, which I absolutely love. I feel like the new chat feature over on Clubhouse gives me the ability to do that over there, but I'd have to leave here to go there. So do I want to do that? But I see Morgan did make it up. Morgan, I am so curious to hear, and I'm so glad you caught this, took a screenshot, and sent it over into the live chat here. What's your thought on this?
So I think we heard from Alessandro that they were working on this, and this looks like that they haven't canned it. I'm not sure. We've seen voice tweets here, and they didn't really catch on. I guess I'm more interested in just seeing that a platform like Threads is thinking about audio at all. And of course, we haven't yet seen any live component to this, but we know that Threads is built on the same backend as Instagram. And of course, Instagram has a fairly sophisticated live component, which is both audio and video. So if this is like dipping the toe in the water of audio, it would be interesting to see whether at some point they would add something like Instagram Stories bar to Threads, which we've heard rumors of, and whether that would bring live video and live audio to their platform. So it's just one I'm watching, really. This was the first little inkling we'd seen again after Alessandro.
And so this is just something that they're working on. It's not out for anybody yet?
No, it's not out. So Alessandro had found it in the code, and now Chris is seeing it show up in the UI that he can access. I'm not sure whether this is on the web or the mobile app that he's looking at here, but yeah. I mean, the other interesting thing is they've been talking recently about shipping extra features like GIF support and adding polls, and that this is just being included alongside those. So I suppose this is more like feature parity work with X that's going on here. Is the other way to think about it.
And I feel like that's what's been missing over on Threads, and why, I went over there in the beginning like everyone else, but there was not much to it. Now that they're adding more features, I find some of them interesting, so I would probably be more inclined to go back over and spend time in there. Is the GIF feature available yet? Do you know?
I don't, and I like you both. I think I have to confess that I've been spending less time on Threads. I am, I think, still classed as a daily active user, and when I do post there, I get good engagement. I'm I'm not yet verified on X, so when I do post here, it does feel like posting into the void often. So Threads has been quite good for that, but as you probably also know, I've been slightly wrapped up in asynchronous short form audio the last 3 weeks, so not really doing text posts at the moment.
And we want to hear about that, because you have really come up with such a unique way to use the new Clubhouse chat feature through travel. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun and entirely unplanned. That I was going to Spain, I was going to Sevilla, and I figured, wouldn't it be nice to bring my friends with me? And I suppose chats are rather like doing little tweets. They're quite like microblogging. And it's also quite nice, I think, because you can bring in sounds around you as you go. So I suppose it was me exploring a new medium, and this seemed like a good way to do it. And actually, it was really nice because not only did I have familiar voices coming in, and some of them were really helpful. For example, there were points where I recorded the street sounds of a Spanish guitarist playing a song, and I didn't know what it was. And somebody listening to the chat who was Spanish posted the song link from Spotify and identified what it was that they were playing, and somebody else was recommending a restaurant to go to or a museum or things like that. So it actually added some of the richness to this. I mean, part of me was being lazy that I hadn't really researched the city before I went. So having a group of people giving me tips live while I was there was really nice, actually.
As a listener, I totally felt like I was being brought along with you. I think that was the magic of it. It was just amazing. Even not to have anything to add to the conversation, just being able to listen to where you were and what you were doing that day, the sounds and all that kind of thing was just a really interesting and ear-opening experience, you know. And some of the clips that you recorded, there was no voices, there was no kind of explanation. It was just street noise, or, as you say, you know, the amazing flamenco performance you went to. I could see it, even though I couldn't see it. And I think sometimes these kind of off-the-cuff ideas are the ones that fly, right?
Yeah, it's something somebody said very early on in this chat was that it was like painting a picture, I think. And that's how I began to think about it, that each one of these little segments was trying to convey the experience. And maybe I would describe something in front of me, or maybe I would try and do it by capturing a bit of sound that was very specific to that location. So that was like you might go around with your camera on a photo walk, but this was using your ears. So it did feel like a new form in a way, a new kind of creative medium, actually.
Well, I did notice as well that your profile picture changed in line sometimes with what you were doing, almost to give us like a bit of a hint. And I absolutely loved, there was a bit of a thread at the very beginning of it where someone had asked you to get an orange, and then kind of your profile picture towards the end of your journey, or you might have even landed back here in the UK by then, but was the orange. And I just thought, oh, it's just like, it's come complete full circle. And you've used every element that there is in chats, and there aren't that many, but to convey that story and bring it kind of full circle, I just thought it was, yeah, magical, really. Well done, Morgan.
I have to thank my mother for inviting me on the trip in the first place.
And she was a fantastic guest as well, wasn't she? I mean, lots of people loved hearing from your mum.
Yes, I mean, that's another thing, is being able to bring in voices. I didn't do as much of that as I'd like, but I can imagine this sort of form developing and doing another trip like that, where you're actually going around looking for interesting people that you might talk to, and bringing in those voices. So it's almost like on the ground journalism or travel blogging. You can see how this could develop, I think.
Did she need a lot of persuasion to get involved, Morgan, when you were talking to your mum?
She did wonder who these strange people on the internet I'd been talking to were, but I didn't really give her much choice. We were sitting down for lunch, and then I just said, "Okay, we're going to do this now." And I think she'd had a drink and thought, "All right, I'll do it."
It all just added to the romance and the idea that you were presenting to us. It was fabulous. So thank you very much for taking me along on your week-long trip, on your journey. And yeah, what a magical way of doing it, and using, you know, the new tools over there. I mean, generally over there, what you've been over there, I know you have more than I have in recent weeks. How is the general atmosphere of former Clubhouse creators? Are there people still there that are adapting to chats now? I know at first there was a lot of unease, a lot of unrest, a lot of upset over follower numbers disappearing, followers becoming friends, and, you know, who could we reach and what networks were we now available to us in the app because of the way they've changed it. How is that bubbling under at the moment?
Yeah, well, to be very honest here, it's still mixed. There are people who, and you could imagine, most people on Clubhouse were really there to take part in the live part. That's what they came for. And I think that they're quite wary about something that isn't live, and thinks, well, look, obviously live is always going to be better, so that's where we'll invest our time. And then I think the other part there, which you mentioned, is a lot of people used to be there to grow an audience and get reach and do that kind of thing. And the shift to friendship, I think, for those people have left them questioning, you know, is this, you know, what does this mean for what they want? So there's a reshuffling, I think, and people who are going to make it through this transition are probably there for a certain kind of thing that the platform now supports, and other people will find it less useful to them. So it's going to be reshuffling of that. But on the other side, I have seen some really interesting chats, and getting a lot of nice voice messages too, that I'm beginning to talk much more to people one-on-one in private through voice messages throughout the day. So I'm feeling more connected in a slightly different way than I used to people that I do know there.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've always kind of said voice conveys more intention, emotion, detail, all of those things. But I guess that's really what's coming through now with the sort of uptick in use of voice messaging, is that you realise you can really hear all of that stuff as opposed to just reading it in the written word and perhaps missing some of those little nuances of emotion and things that are in them. I think that's a really interesting addition to what we're learning about while we're using these new voice messaging features.
Yeah, I said to you both, I think, earlier today, but just a general thing, if voice messaging does, if it does catch on in other places too, it can be really nice, not to think of it in terms of oh goodness, I have an inbox full of voice messages, but to actually hear somebody's voice and you can hear them laugh and you can hear them, think. And I told you about one that I got yesterday, which was a friend who their wife had just given birth to their second child, and they left me a voice message telling me this. And obviously to hear their emotion, it wouldn't have been the same as text. It was very, very special. So I think no surprise to people like us, I think, but it does add something important.
I want to bring Cindy Lou in here, just giving you the mic there. I know that you are an avid user of Clubhouse. I'd like to actually know how you feel about the changeover to chats and whether you think the atmosphere over there, are people getting used to it? Are you getting different users, new users on board, or are the people that used to use the app still hanging around? Those kind of things. And hello, how are you?
Hi, hello. I'm fine. Yeah, I wanted to come up because as Morgan was sharing his trip to Sevilla, it just reminded me of the new voices that we are hearing over on Clubhouse, and a lot of the chats are opening it up for that. I also believe that the people who are going to stay on Clubhouse are the people who have built genuine relationships. And I've helped a few clubs build really large followings, and those people also had personal large followings. And they've made their house with their followers. When used correctly, that house is going to be amazing. I held a room, not correctly, but when used in a way that's productive, I guess, and that produces um, more connection and more relationship. It's amazing. I held a room in my house last night, just a spontaneous, just opened it up because I had built 14,000 followers. And as I was sharing, I had people coming in from all the different streams of communities that I had connected with over the last 2.5, 3 years. There's such a big opportunity to connect to the people who have chosen to voice that I think that those who got frustrated and left too quickly have really kind of missed the diamonds in the backyard, that they're right there. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Oh, that's really interesting. So really what you're saying is, people need to stick with this and kind of shift their mindset a bit, but then it can open up a whole realm of what they're really after. They want this connection. They want these deeper connections. We're hearing Morgan there saying, he's having, voice conversations with people in the DMs and wider friends of friends, etc. That is all still there for them, right? It's just a different way of getting to it.
Exactly. And the ability to do your live rooms is still there. The ability to have the asynchronous chat so that you can actually sleep and take your break and, take a break and live your life, which is what is happening. We're no longer in the lockdown period of our living. We are out and about, and we don't have hours to sit on Clubhouse and just Clubhouse. So, yeah, it's been a really good shift for me personally, too.
Yeah, just to quickly add to that, there's no way that I would have had a week in Sevilla with my mother and I would have taken an hour or two out to do a live room. But I was able to contribute and share and connect with people throughout that in these little bursts. So that wouldn't have worked as live, but did work as async.
There was another thought. And my other thought was, with all of these apps, like there's all of these apps. I remember when social media first started, it was like pick one or two and run with it. But then as you guys were talking about the YouTube and, expanding and expanding, it's like, how do you guys feel that voice can be best created and curated and shared out to the world to take advantage of the different platforms, but not feel like you're so scattered?
That's a really good point. It's difficult. I think, as with any, I guess I take it back to what I know about podcasting, and it's about understanding your audience. It always goes back to that, right? So I guess when I start to feel really scattered about what I'm doing with promoting my social audio or trying to draw people into the spaces that I might be part of or hosting, it's about, well, where's the audience for this? And actually, I'm going to focus on those platforms and what content works best for my audience on those platforms, and taking it back down into those kind of basics, because otherwise it is that scattergun approach. If you feel like you've got to spread yourself across all the different places, it's almost impossible to do right now. And it's also almost impossible to work out what really works on each of them, because they're all changing all the time and updating, bringing out their new things. They're shiny new things that you think, oh, have I got to jump on that one and create some content that relates to that for it as well? So I think it is about knowing your community, like I've just said a little bit about there, really. When you understand your community and you know why people are joining the house or joining to listen to the chat or joining our space right here, then you can understand where your content should go and how to put out more of the things that are attracting people in, or at least that's the theory, right? I mean, I say that, mind you, Madalyn, X, I nearly said Twitter. X has been my platform and yours for a very, very long time. We put our eggs in the basket of doing spaces, right? And then Twitter has turned into X, and lots of people that we knew aren't here anymore. And suddenly I'm putting out content that I would assume or would think, an audience would be interested in on my feed, and it's going absolutely nowhere, like beyond nowhere. And so and that's quite demoralizing when you're over here on X, when it's been a platform that you've relied on for a really long time, right? So I'm sure Madalyn could talk to that an awful lot, having been here even longer than I have. So it's about working out your audience anyway, I think, if that answers the question.
Well said. I liked everything you said, Suze. That was like perfect. So I'm just going to say ditto so we can hear from our other speakers. You said it all. I love it. Tristan is here. He's been waiting patiently. Hey, Tristan, how are you?
Hey there. Good. Nice to see both of you. Well, everyone. There's a good few faces that to know in the room from different places. I just wanted to expand, or not touch on too much, but the audio space, but I guess reflecting on the Clubhouse stuff that we've been doing. Not get too much into how do you order these things when you have social audio or these audio conversations. They're much harder to order. It definitely seems to be that's a problem. How do you choose to prioritize them? And that could be an interesting discussion at some point, because are they content or are they conversations? And when you're having sort of things that are back and forth or small sound bites, small voicemails, is it personality? Are you talking to that person, or is there content in there? And I think Morgan and some other people, there's another guy, John, who does lots of stuff with he's I think in KL or somewhere in that direction, or where's he gone? I've forgotten. He's gone overseas, and we were even listening to him from the aeroplane and from sounds from the aeroplane and he tagged in a few photos from his Instagram too, so we could feel like we were eating the amazing food that he had on board at the same time. So that's been another exciting ordinary journey, and one that I'm less familiar with than Seville. So that was fun. But the other sense had been over on Clubhouse was, are we all of a generation who have grown up with longer form content, and that's why we resonate more with rooms or spaces like this, and we find it harder with the shorter form content, or it doesn't resonate as much, and therefore is the point of the shorter form content for younger audience, and because it's now friends of friends over on the platform and friendly on Clubhouse, would we not see if there was a whole audience of much younger people who joined and were much more using it in a different way than we might? Because maybe it's a different conversation space for a different audience. And that's been the other sort of interesting thing. Is it creative? Is it conversation? And where does it go? So I just sort of put that one back for you.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, I'm very interested in the is it creative or is it conversation? You could apply that to podcasts, right? Lots of people do conversational podcasts and then use it as their content to promote themselves or what they do or all those kind of things. And you think, well, is this really the most is this creative or is it a conversation? Exactly that. So yeah, super interested in that idea. I'll definitely be taking that one away to ponder on further. And then you said something about, are we seeing kind of those younger voices come on board onto the app? I think personally, we probably aren't, because we're seeing friends of friends. And unless someone's got like a younger demographic, then we're probably not going to see those people. Whether the app is in itself, I'm not sure. And that was where I was going to say, Morgan, do you know?
So firstly, I don't think we'd have a way to tell right now. And if that did happen in the future, there's also, for the reasons you pointed out, that if someone coming on doesn't have that overlap with the friends of friends network of yours, then you're very likely not going to meet them. There's a whole separate question around how you might meet them through houses, and we'll see where that goes. But I think right now it's still they're calling it, this is not Clubhouse 2.0 really, it's 1.9, and there's still a lot of polishing to do before they're ready to see if things are working and they can add fuel. So I don't imagine at the moment that we're at a point when lots of young people are coming on. That said, if you do go and search, if you Google something like Gen Z voice messaging, I think I shared this with you again earlier today, but you'll see a whole raft of articles that were written late last year and early this year about the increase in voice messaging amongst younger demographics. So as far as that is a trend and that holds up, I think there is something to look for there in terms of whether younger generations do pick this up in the next year or so. But I think right now it's too early to tell.
Cool. Another thing to watch, another thing to put on the radar, Madalyn. Cindy Lou, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, I have seen two trends over on Clubhouse with the asynchronous chats. One has been that voices that have never been heard before are being heard. They have the opportunity to speak. They feel like they have the ability to do that. They're not intimidated. A lot of people who have never spoken before are starting to speak. And number two, people who had left the app are coming back and really enjoying the asynchronous chats. So those are two trends that I've seen.
Yeah, I've been back. I've been back because I really like it. I think it's really awesome, and it's definitely attractive to me. So it's brought me back to Clubhouse.
You know, it has been a bold move for them to go this way, but as you said, Cindy Lou, you know, it's reacting to what we're like in society now. We're not stuck indoors in our houses, thank goodness, and so in order for the app to continue and for it to be a thing, it needs to move with the times, which is what they're trying to do. So it's a bold move, and I think I'm kind of in awe of their bravery in stepping out there and doing it, right?
What I'd like to do is just finish with a great question that Gerald put into the chat and end it there. He asked, Google Podcast discontinuing in 2024, how big of a concern is it to the podcasters? And we've talked about this here in previous weeks. And as a podcaster, it doesn't really bother me at all. I mean, yes, I want as many places out there for people to consume our podcasts, but at the end of the day, it's being discontinued for a reason. I don't really know a whole lot of people that use it. I know if you're an Android user, that's really the main ones that use it, but there's so many other options. So it doesn't really bother me. There's so many options available today to consume podcasts. Suze, what's your thought on that? Is it a concern to you at all?
I think from a host point of view, they've been driving it into the ground for the last 18 months. So it's been pretty much become null and void anyway. It's hardly worth bothering with. It doesn't really give you the information that you need. It's not kind of accessible. It's easy to distribute it via whatever your podcast host is, because it's just another click of the button and send it through, and it's Google, so why wouldn't you? But in all honesty, they have left it to rot because they had these plans with YouTube. So I don't think they've got to the point where no one's going to miss it, right? But whether or not bundling in podcasts with YouTube Music is a good move, whether or not, video podcasts are really going to overtake audio or anything like that they might be thinking for YouTube, I don't know. But Google, they'll start a thing, try a thing, chuck a thing out the window, and this is just the latest one. So I think personally, as someone who manages a portfolio of different podcasts, it won't make any difference to us. I'm sure once it's easy to zip things up on YouTube Music, that will be somewhere that we'll put our podcasts as well. At the moment, it's not even available over here in the UK, so we can't even try it out. But I think, that they knew what they were doing. They just basically left it to one side and ignored it to the point that it's useless anyway, to be quite honest.
Well said. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.